Greetings and welcome to the newest episode of Rice Crypto. I'm Rice, and on today's show, I am joined by a first-time guest, Aaron Day. He is an entrepreneur, a political activist, and the author of The Final Countdown, Crypto, Gold, Silver, and the People's Last Stand Against Tyranny by Central Bank Digital Currencies. Now, before we begin, I encourage you to make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. Smash that like button and hit that notification bell so you can be updated for when new videos come out just like this one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me on today's show is a guest that I've been looking forward to talking to. He's been recommended by several subscribers. Today, I am joined by Aaron Day. Aaron, welcome to the show. How you doing today, man?
Oh, thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
No, we definitely have a lot in common, and this is going to be a great conversation. I hope people enjoy it, and I'm definitely, like I said, I'm looking forward to it. I've been checking out your work, and I see a lot of similarities with what we're doing, a lot of parallels. So I think this is going to be a great conversation. But for people who might be unfamiliar with who you are, do you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Sure. So my name's Aaron Day. My background is I've started out as a serial entrepreneur. I mean, I was always kind of liberty-minded. I actually started an Ayn Rand club in high school, and then I dropped out of college, started an internet company in the mid-90s, sold it in 2001, became an investor in tech companies for a little while, but decided the entrepreneurial side was really where it was at. So I started my second company in 2004. And that company was in the healthcare space. It was a successful, profitable company growing, and it was destroyed by Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and Attorney General Eric Holder. This was under Obama's administration. And I wasn't targeted. So I was literally just collateral damage. Nobody was specifically going after my company. It was just collateral damage. So that kind of turned me into a, full-time liberty activist. I moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project in 2009. Became chair of the Free State Project for a while, got involved in political activism, ran a number of groups, super PACs, helped get over 100 people elected, even ran for U.S. Senate myself, and realized by 2018 that there's no political solution at all, even being in New Hampshire. And so I exited not only politics, but I exited banks. So I started living entirely on crypto, gold, and silver in 2019. And just to take one quick step back, I was introduced to Bitcoin in 2012 through Roger Ver and Ian Freeman, who is another free stater. So that's how I got my start in 2012 and then exited fiat in 2019. And I wasn't going to have anything to do with politics. And I was kind of, I went from being heavily involved in activism to going completely dark for 5 years, and people didn't even know if I was living in New Hampshire. And then COVID happened, and then I started to see friends like Ian attacked by the federal government. And I actually went to his sentencing hearing. So he's in prison for 8 years for selling Bitcoin. I saw Jeremy Kauffman, another free stater, targeted by the SEC. And I looked at both COVID tyranny and why my friends were being targeted by the federal government in the crypto space, and found that there is a common kind of theme behind it all, which is that the crackdown on crypto is designed to prevent any alternatives so that they can roll out CBDCs. And all of this with CBDCs is part of a larger plan to move towards a one world global technocracy. So when I realized how far along CBDCs are and what the relationship was between CBDCs and the complete regulatory crackdown on crypto, I wrote a book about it called The Final Countdown, which you can see here. And I actually ran for president as a Republican, not trying to win the election, but specifically, I thought the CBDC threat was such an urgent issue. I wanted to try to elevate it in the debates and use the political circus as a way to get the information out there. And I did talk to some politicians, and we can get into some of that later. But now I exited the race in October of last year, and now I'm focused full time on continuing to not only warn people about CBDCs, but to teach people how to exit the dollar and how to use crypto, gold, and silver for day-to-day transactions. So I do 4-hour workshops all over the country. I've been to 22 states. We are currently scheduling 14 different events. We have one coming up in New Jersey on October the 5th. And I'm a fellow at the Brownstone Institute, where I write articles and give talks as well at various events all around the country. So that's the quick thumbnail.
I could tell you've done the interview circuit a little bit since you've gotten that down packed, man. I do appreciate you kind of keeping that condensed and sharing a little bit about who you are, because I think it does set the tone for where the conversation is going to be headed. So I will have links down below for everything that we talk about, which will mainly be just sharing Aaron's social. So if you guys aren't following Aaron Day over on the X side, you could do that at Aaron R. Day. Also, there's an article that was just recently released on the brownstone.org website that you guys should check out, talking about you might own nothing sooner than you think, which again, we'll get into this. Then you have your website, daylightfreedom.org. And also you have a Rumble channel, the Aaron Day Show. I'm going to have links down below for all of this. What exactly is your involvement with the Brownstone Institute? And then what is, if you don't mind following up with answering, what is daylightfreedom.org?
My role with Brownstone is an organization, if you're not already following it, that supports people who pursue the truth and face significant obstacles in terms of attacks on career, attacks personally. They support people in a variety of areas. This organization was really the only organization speaking out about lockdowns, about mandates, about the censorship industrial complex. And so I'm just a fellow there. So they're supporting my work and giving me a platform. But there's, the way Brownstone works is there's no central direction of this. I mean, they support people and give people a platform to speak the truth on the issues that are important to them. And so I'm really kind of leading the charge on the CBDC front. And I highly recommend people check out the Brownstone Institute, support the work and follow the work, because I've met some incredible people at the Brownstone Institute. And Jeffrey Tucker, who I've known for a decade, has really taken the lead on this, again, when no one else was willing to do that during the COVID era. I started Daylight Freedom Foundation with my wife, and it is a nonprofit really that dovetails with what I'm doing at the Brownstone Institute. It's all about promoting, as you see there, free will, love, decentralization, and abundance. And to me, my worldview right now, I don't, even sign up for, well, which political or even ideological group are you in anymore? To me, I've kind of just through my own life experiences boiled it down to, right now we have a battle between free will and determinism, love versus fear, decentralization versus centralization, and abundance versus scarcity. And so the Daylight Freedom Foundation is a 501c3 that promotes those ideas, and that's the organization that I'm hosting the workshops that I'm doing, these 4-hour CBDC workshops all around the country. And by the way, I'm going to be doing these outside of the U.S. as well, but the original focus has been on the United States.
Okay. Now the book, The Final Countdown, is it, I was trying to find it like on Amazon. I didn't see it come up on Amazon. So where can people get the book?
It should be on Amazon.
Okay. Well, maybe it's shadow banned, because I was even looking up, what was I looking up just a little bit ago? I was looking up a couple different channels. Rethinking the Dollar did an interview with Jeff Berwick, and I was looking up that channel, and I had to go through different search filters to be able to find it. So
if you type The Final Countdown and Aaron Day, you should get it. I'm getting it. It might be shadow banned in part because I unsubscribed to the whatever exclusivity thing. What I'm working on an update for the book, and I'm going to make a PDF available that people can buy using crypto and alternative assets. And so I turned off the exclusive component, and that might actually have led to the shadow banning.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense the way that you're explaining it. So, with the revised edition, do you have any plans for a release date yet?
No, I'm trying to get to it as soon as I can, hopefully in the next month or so. I mean, the information in the book is still good. It's solid, but I need to update because of changes that have gone on since last June, not only in crypto, but also, which we'll talk about, the Great Taking, because the book's focus was on CBDCs. But what I've really learned is that money is just one type of asset. Money represents only 5% of global assets. They're actually working on centrally tokenizing not only money, but all of our assets and putting it onto a platform that can be monitored, tracked, and censored. And so because of that, I'm going to expand the book to go into that. And you have it up there, what's called the Great Taking, and steps that we can do to mitigate the damage and take ownership of all of our assets, not just money, but everything. Because this idea of you will own nothing and be happy, they're like 80% of the way there, and we are completely oblivious to it.
Yes, there the majority of people definitely are, and I'm thankful for David Webb. That's his name, right?
Yep.
For him putting out the book, and then people putting it out for free, and the documentary that came out with it, and then the interviews that he's done. And I don't know if you've seen the interviews. I may have sent it to you that he's done with Chris Martin from Peak Prosperity. And they were talking about some actual legislation that has been going on in the United States, I think in 2 different states, and I can't remember which ones offhand.
Yeah. So there is. So actually, I'm speaking at Chris Martinson's event, doing a 2-hour talk next month, where I'm actually onboarding people, and this is actually related to this. I've met David Webb, and I've actually talked to all the people that are working on the initiatives at the state level to reverse the changes that were made by the financial institution that basically give away our ownership. Unfortunately, though, the update that hasn't gone out is that it's been shut down. And in fact, when they've tried to put forward this legislation at the state level, behind the scenes, the big banks have put tremendous pressure and have done a lot of effort to make sure that the legislation doesn't pass, which tells you everything that you need to know about the veracity of what it is he's saying in the book, The Great Taking. So to me, so that's the biggest update part of the book, is going to be expanding beyond just tokenized money, which is what CBDCs are, to be the tokenization of everything. And like, to me, honestly, 401ks are a bigger scam than even your bank account. And that is not widely known, and it's not, people actually don't like to hear it either. But the truth is that is the reality, and people need to be warned, or they're going to lose everything.
Yeah, we definitely are going to have ourselves a great conversation, Mr. Aaron Day. When you were talking about, and I wanted to come back to this real quick, when you were introducing yourself and talking about the New Hampshire Free State Project and living on crypto, um, I'm assuming you know this individual who parallels living on crypto as well, living in New Hampshire, Joel Valenzuela. Are you familiar with him?
I'm familiar with him. I've interviewed him before. I just saw him at Porkfest. I'm a big fan of him and what he does. And he beat me to the punch. He was living on crypto 4 years before I was, so I have a lot of respect for him and what he does.
And likewise with you, it's something about people in New Hampshire too. And you mentioned Jeremy Kaufman, who's been on the show several times. It's very unfortunate what happened with the SEC and library. But obviously, I think when we think about the things that are happening to people in the freedom space, it's not by coincidence, and there is a reason for it, unfortunately. And the real revolution will not be televised. They're going to try to sweep all of those people under the rug, just like how it was very odd timing. Well, I shouldn't say odd timing, but it looks like very odd timing. And what happened with Roger with releasing Hijacking Bitcoin book, and within a few weeks of the book being out, maybe a month, I think less than a month, he was arrested for the tax charges for his company, which is absolutely crazy.
So actually, it's all related. And so I was on Free Talk Live with Ian. Ian's read my book. In fact, Ian's reviewed the book, and I actually was talking to him earlier last year, probably February, March last year, about, listen, do you realize the reason you were targeted has to do with, Biden's executive order and this crackdown on crypto? And he agrees. I mean, because, the amount of money that went into surveilling Ian, I mean, this was a multi-year investigation involving 5 different.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Yeah, I just trying to ask a question about Ian real quick. Ian was arrested for selling Bitcoin with the idea he doesn't have a money transmittal license, and there's another word. Is that what he was charged with? Money laundering. And
he was charged without a money transmittal license. And what was I will tell you that one of the worst feelings I've ever had was just sitting through his sentencing hearing and watching how railroaded he was on this. But that is what he was charged with. But then it got worse than that. They actually held him liable for the actions of one of his customers. So one of his customers was involved in what are called romance scams. So basically, women were giving this person their money. under kind of false pretenses. And they held Ian responsible for that. They held him responsible for $3.5 million worth of restitution for what one of his customers did, even though Ian didn't know who the person was, had no idea what was going on, and even had his own KYC on the customers himself. So this would be the equivalent of Jamie Dimon being held liable for Jeffrey Epstein's actions, except the difference is JP Morgan was aware of what Epstein was doing. So that was the part of this that was even more just breathtakingly an abuse of justice. The money transmitter thing, my understanding is that Ian had actually gotten an opinion letter stating that from a lawyer that he didn't need a money transmitter license. And so that was actually kind of a gray area. And I think New Hampshire had even passed some laws stating that, at the state level, you don't need a money transmitter thing. And so it was completely manufactured, but here's why. And I kind of put all this together. So when Ian had his sentencing hearing, which was, 9/11 last year, I actually sent a tweet around trying to organize and get people to attend the event. And I actually asked Roger, I sent him a DM. I said, hey, listen, will you share this? And so Roger did. He shared this tweet promoting the sentencing hearing. And 7 months later, Roger gets arrested in Spain. And the thing about this, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit, a lot of people don't know this, but Roger Ver learned about Bitcoin from Ian Freeman and Free Talk Live in 2010. Now, once you understand that the government is targeting people in crypto and specifically targeting pro-liberty people in crypto, once you understand that they are actually doing that, then it makes a lot of sense as to why they're going after people like Ian and like Roger, because these are completely non-violent people who promote voluntary exchange and who promote peace and are anti-violence and anti-war. So these are the least, there are a lot of scammers in crypto. These are the least, these are not scamming people at all. These are people that are ideologically pure and pushing freedom and voluntary interaction. So you say to yourself, well, why would they focus on that? Well, let's think about it. I mean, these guys are good at analyzing. Like you look at something like vaccine adoption, right? Carolyn Ellison, Sam Bankman-Fried's girlfriend, her dad works at MIT working on different strategies for manipulating the public to maximize vaccine uptake. So they understand, they look at this stuff. What makes something go viral? Well, if you're looking at Bitcoin and you're saying to yourself, name two people that did more to get the idea of decentralized cryptocurrency to go viral than Ian Freeman, who had his syndicated radio show all over the country, who started talking about it in 2010, and Roger Ver, who was Bitcoin Jesus. And so these guys were targeted because they were effective at promoting peer-to-peer digital cash for the world. After I interviewed Roger, I interviewed a guy named Steven Nerioff, who was involved with Ethereum and a variety of other things. He was a lawyer who actually created the first utility token, created the ICO concept. He actually created the first security token, got involved, found some corruption with Ethereum, between Ethereum and the head of the SEC. And the DOJ came in and manufactured a case in order to keep him silent about what he knew. They manufactured a case against him for, I've got to remember what extortion case. And they sent 12 people from the FBI to his house. They arrested him. They threw him in a van, and they basically said, unless you provide information that leads to indictments and convictions on people on this list, you'll never see your kids again. And on that list, and this was in 2019, were Roger Ver, Patrick Byrne, all people that we know, even Naomi Brockwell, all people in the Liberty crypto space. So when we say in the Liberty space, we're on a watch list, or when I say that the government is coming after crypto people, this isn't a theory. This is actually DOJ explicit strategy, where not only are they going after people at the intersection of crypto and liberty, they're manufacturing cases, fake cases, extortion cases against people. They ended up dropping that case against Nerioff, and I think he now has a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against the federal government. But the point is, this is serious. They are going after specifically pro-liberty people in the crypto space. And so we need to take this stuff incredibly serious. I mean, I say it's DEFCON 1 because it really is. They've almost shut off the on-roads and the off-ramps. And I'm sure we'll get into this more, but these Bitcoin maxis that are trying to think that they're manipulating the political process are going to accelerate the demise of peer-to-peer crypto faster than any other catalyzing event, in my opinion.
I agree. And I don't think it's just, I mean, it does look like a lot of liberty-minded people, and I definitely agree that a lot of liberty-minded people are targeted. I don't know that you would consider like the Samurai Wallet developers, Tornado Cash necessarily liberty, but they're putting out effective tools that allow for us to have that financial privacy that that be don't want us to have. So it seems like anything in the space that's going to give us that kind of freedom, that real freedom away from the tracking and tracing that's coming, is a threat to the system. And then you also got to take in conjunction the crypto media itself too. We talk about fake news, and the mainstream news situation, that is basically the same thing has happened in the cryptocurrency space. I mean, the whole idea of renaming or rebranding Roger from Bitcoin Jesus to Bitcoin Judas, that was all straight in the crypto media. So
Yep.
they target certain individuals and paint certain people in a negative light, and those are the people that smart individuals should be supporting 100%. So yeah, what made you decide to do what you're doing, educating people about central bank digital currencies and what's coming and how to potentially avoid it?
Well, at a very simple level, once I researched what was going on the regulatory front, and I saw the progression and what's behind CBDCs, I think CBDCs are the single biggest threat to human liberty. Once you can program and control people's money, you can control their behavior. I mean, essentially, CBDCs are the gateway to digital tyranny and the complete loss of free will. Because it's essentially the centerpiece for social credit scores, vaccine passports, and digital IDs. So kind of from my background doing entrepreneurial things and working on various political activism, I realized this truly is a threat. And if this isn't stopped, then this is bad news, literally for everybody. This is kind of a game over kind of thing if you really believe in freedom. And so I couldn't not do this, right? So once I knew this is one of those things where once you know this, then you can't not do it. And so then it just becomes, how to become effective at spreading the word, which is difficult for a whole variety of reasons. One is most people have no idea how money works. I mean, I think Henry Ford said something like, if people understood how money works, there would be rioting in the streets by the end of the day.
You want to see how in sync that we are? Because I mean, just there's certain things that I just like to keep on the back burner, like little images and things that like pop up every once in a while. And it's very odd that you mention something that I already have. It's well enough that people of our nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Just another sign of how in sync we are with this, with what we talk about.
Yeah, no, that's great. And but I think that's absolutely true. So the problem with all of this is it's so within crypto, people are fighting over my coin versus your coin. And the reality is, I think one of the big problems, and I probably have spent more time recently within crypto as opposed to educating people outside, even though that's the real opportunity. But in part, it's because the people within crypto are actually taking away the ability to offer a real peer-to-peer solution. And so that's actually been a very big source of agitation. But not only do you have to educate people on how money works, but I think the people within crypto are so focused on, well, this is the market cap of my coin versus your coin, that they haven't observed the fact that while we've been fighting internally and doing things like meme coins and DeFi, they've been working on CBDCs and the tokenization of all of our real world assets. We are competing not just amongst ourselves. We are competing with big tech. We are competing with fintech. We are competing with central banks, and we're competing with governments. And we've taken our eye off of the entire landscape of who we're competing against. And that has put us now in a position where we're really behind. I mean, we're at the bottom of the ninth inning and we're down 10-0. And the other side has bribed the empire. They're not drug tested. And most people on our side don't even know we're in a game. And that's the challenge that I've experienced as I've done this. Because it's like, how do you, at what level do you address people when you're trying to communicate this information? And recently it's more, I don't even understand the BTC Maxi philosophical mindset at this point. It's so disconnected from what Bitcoin was in the white paper and what it was when it started out. And now I truly believe this political strategy that they're pursuing is going to be the biggest catalyst for CBDCs.
Yeah, no, the tribalism, it creates more division. We're not working towards a common goal, and it's easy to conquer when people are divided. I mean, it's in our national anthem. We talk about united we stand, divided we fall. It's all just laid out right there. And if we're going to be divided, then yeah, it's going to be really easy to come in and take control. Because we're not paying attention to the enemy. We're looking at everybody in the crypto space technically should be working towards the same goal, or most people should be working towards the same goal. So you should see that unity and working together. The other thing I wanted to commend you on is the fact that you are doing this education about central bank digital currencies, about what money is, and trying to get that information out there, especially knowing that people that are close to you have been targeted and persecuted. So that says a lot for you as an individual. So I appreciate you doing that. I don't know where we should take the conversation from this point. There's so much that I want to talk about. I don't know if you want to get directly into the central bank digital currency stuff, because I did tell you a little bit privately via some messages that I do check out a lot of Whitney Webb stuff, Mark Goodwin, and the idea that they're talking about is that there's not going to be like a traditional, in a sense, central bank digital currency. Mark Goodwin's called them more private bank digital currencies, but stable coins, because it makes a lot of sense. If there was a CBDC to be created which had to be the Federal Reserve, there would have to be legislation that would have to be done for that. And there's also technically the Constitution and all these other things in play that would make difficult for the agenda that the governments seem to want to do, or whomever this system is. So by privatizing it, it kind of alleviates all that legislation, all that headache, and they can still have all the same benefits. And I've been trying to get people away from certain words. Like central bank digital currency seems to be the word that they want us to not want, but it's all programmable currency. And that's the thing that people need to realize, is whether they call it a stable coin, a digital dollar, a central bank digital currency, a private bank digital currency, it all ultimately is just programmable currency.
I'll tell you, it is an interesting one, and I'm probably going to do another long article about what is a CBDC, because first of all, you have to start with what the end game is. And until you understand what the end game is, none of the rest of it makes a lot of sense. The end game for this is a global digital currency backed by energy credits. This is actually what the technocracy movement has been heading toward ever since the 1930s. You can even look at Google Technocracy Inc. You can go to their website. You can actually see their organization still exists, but you can see from the 1930s that if you had to summarize what technocracy is about, it is about flipping the economy from being a price-based system to be an energy credit-based system. And I discussed this in my article about how we get there. But if what I say sounds outlandish, I want you to consider this. Google Doconomy MasterCard. There is in existence today a MasterCard that is co-branded with the United Nations and their climate action number 13 sustainable development goal that people use, where when you use too much carbon, your card cuts off. So already today, so when I say that the end goal is energy credits, you're like, oh, they'll never be able to do that. It's too complicated. Governments are stupid, blah, 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 blah. Understand that MasterCard already has relationships with over 150 companies. They are already tracking carbon usage. They're already tying carbon usage to financial transactions, and they're already censoring and shutting off the use of money based on hitting carbon targets. That exists, and they have been working on that and building this for years. So this is operational. This
How
is
did you when you called that MasterCard, what is it called?
It's Doconomy, Doconomy.
Docony. I'm just looking it up and I couldn't figure out how to spell it. Sorry.
And it's wild. And I put it in my article as well. You can actually see the card. You can go to the website and look at this stuff. And I'm like, when I wrote about this in my book, I actually wasn't aware of that, even though I should have been. It just didn't pop up in my research. So when I say that they want to flip to this kind of system, it's not theoretical. It's actually in existence. It's a real thing. And what is required I mean, see, look at that. That's April 30th, 2019 is the date on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so when you dig into MasterCard, and we go multiple levels in this, but MasterCard's influence in funding Bitcoin and everything else. But anyway, if you dig into this and you see the partners that MasterCard has on all this green stuff, it should be very alarming. And probably you've noticed if you buy an airline ticket now, it tells you whether it's a net positive for CO. It ranks your airline tickets based on carbon.
I didn't know that.
There are now places where you go to a restaurant, and depending on what state you're in, the receipt has some kind of indication of carbon as well. So they have been building this for years. They are building this infrastructure. They're already utilizing the infrastructure. They're testing the infrastructure. Once you understand that that's the end goal, and I actually outlined in my article how we get there, because it involves putting CBDCs and all assets on one platform, connecting those on a nation by nation basis, so you have one platform for all tokenized money and all tokenized assets, and then at some point you just simply flip and exchange the CBDCs to a system backed by energy credits. So with that,
one ledger to control them all, basically.
One ledger to control them out. So when you understand that, then we can take a step back and talk about central bank digital currencies. And I would say, and I haven't stated this really in writing, so I'm gonna put this together, and I may stumble through explaining it now, but in essence, we already have a central bank digital currency. Right now, the way money is produced is the government issues an IOU to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve creates money out of thin air in a database, in an account. 92% of money is digital. Only 8% is actually physical cash. So today, to be excruciatingly clear, the central bank creates digital money. 92% of the money that we have is digital. That is a fact of life. And the one thing, and you're right about, and it is a challenge, because the part of me is like CBDCs are bad, but actually CBDCs are not really the problem. Fiat currency, the dollar, is the problem. It's the problem today. It's not a future problem. The dollar is already being censored. People like Kanye West, Nick Fuentes, Canadian truckers, religious groups, crypto groups, people that are in the marijuana industry. It goes on and on and on. Gun shop owners, they've already had their money cut off. When you look at bank accounts, and I actually took a bunch of like the top 4 largest banks and downloaded the contracts and reviewed them. They can shut off our accounts without cause. They can change fees without consent. They can and do share our transaction information or sell our transaction information to third parties. And they are already working with the IRS using AI to analyze our spending patterns. So when you talk to most people about what they're worried about with CBDCs, or even some states that'll put in anti-CBDC legislation, it's divorced from reality, because they're already doing all of those things today with the existing system. So then in reality, so because actually this is why it's going to be a lengthy article, because this question of, well, what is a CBDC? Because again, I could argue we already have a CBDC. Well, then it comes down to this issue of programmability. And I'd argue maybe it's even tokenization. But you could have a CBDC without having tokenization. So that's actually a kind of a difference without a distinction, or distinction without a difference, however that goes. So the issue is this: without getting congressional approval, without an executive order, the existing banks today could, using APIs and the programming of the existing system, program the existing money. You could use FedNow. You could use things with SWIFT. There's nothing preventing the existing system from becoming programmable. Now, tokenization makes that easier. But if they were really dead set on that, you could actually program our existing money without any constitutional approval or even congressional approval. So then we get into this mode of tokenization or not tokenization, and what you were saying about Whitney Webb and others. So again, I'd say we already have CBDCs, but the part that people are worried about, the programmability, will come one of two ways. Currently, under Biden, Executive Order 14067, it is currently this government's policy to pursue a central bank digital currency. This has been the case since March the 9th of 2022. It is also current government policy to regulate, using a whole of government approach, all of crypto. And they've been doing that. That's why a lot of our friends are in prison and exchanges have been shut down and so on and so forth. And so people will say, well, the Republicans have a better approach. But if you look at the legislation, and to your point, What Cynthia Loomis, by the way, who is, I think, the worst, she's the biggest catalyst to digital tyranny in all of this. Her laser eyes and everything aside, I encourage everybody, read her bills. Her bill, her latest bill, bans algorithmic stablecoins. It gives stablecoins explicitly to registered financial institutions in the United States. And it imposes reporting requirements that guarantee that the only people issuing stablecoins legally will be the largest United States banks. And so the net effect of this is, what is a stablecoin? It is programmable money. And what is the difference if it's issued by the central bank or issued by the commercial banks, who, by the way, are the ones who own the central bank? It's a distinction without a difference. We get programmable money anyway. We already have censorable, have money that can be canceled. We already have money that's being tracked. The programmability piece will come one of two ways. But the Republicans, every piece of legislation drafted by the Republicans in the House gives more power to banks, enhances KYC AML, takes away more power from the individual. So everybody that's excited, whoever out there is excited about regulation, and anybody who gives you these rules of the road, understand the rules of the road that have already been drafted in the best case scenario remove our rights and move towards programmability. Now, one other thing, because there are two big misconceptions about central bank digital currencies that I encounter with people in the Liberty space. The first is, they say, we'll never get CBDCs because the government is incompetent. And they point to things like Obamacare. Understand that the government is not creating CBDCs. The US CBDC is being funded by the largest banks in the United States through the Federal Reserve System, funding the smartest developers out of MIT. The US retail CBDC project, called Project Hamilton, which started in 2019, actually has Corey Fields as one of the co-authors of the white paper. Corey Fields is a Bitcoin Core developer who worked on SegWit and worked on Lightning. He's literally one of the white paper co-authors. So it's MIT and top developers funded by banks. The only thing Congress has to do, the government has to do in order to implement the CBDCs, is to have politicians who not read the bill that bankers wrote. Right? I mean, which is pretty much their normal MO, right? I don't. So that's the only role of government. But this relates to the second big misconception about all of this, which is that people will say, well, a central bank digital currency, the banks won't want that because this is going to disintermediate the banks. It'll get rid of the banks, and people will now just have this one relationship with the central bank and an account at the Federal Reserve. And that's not how it works. And that's not how any CBDC works. There have been 11 CBDCs already launched. There are 134 countries pursuing CBDCs, and they all have a similar path to what works right now. It would involve the central bank issuing digital currency to the banks, and then the banks continuing to do what they do in terms of their banking function. So a central bank digital currency doesn't mean there are no more commercial banks. So the system that we have today is the central bank creating digital currency in a central database. A CBDC is just them doing the same function, but with digital tokens. Like, this really isn't even that big of a deal, right? At the end of the day, from a major shift. So I already look at this as, we're 80% of the way are there. And the only answer to all of this is to stop using the dollar. The root of all of this is fiat currency. We have to stop using the dollar and stop using government-backed currencies. So it almost doesn't matter which way they're going to do it, but it's important to understand that the Republicans are coming at it from the stablecoin side. The Democrats are coming from it from the central bank side. The end is the same. And we do not want what that looks like, because it is, the complete loss of free will in terms of how that money will be programmed and monitored.
Yeah, and what you're talking about with the counter economics, I try to share a lot with the agorism aspect of that, because it's really important. And if we use counter economics properly, then yeah, we can definitely defeat the enemy, the dollar itself. And I like the way that you're not necessarily trying to corral people into like one specific currency, cryptocurrency, you're more open to that. And I like that. I think that's really cool. Now, I do want to say a few things. I do agree that most of the money, currency, dollars, fiat is digital. Um, it's not programmable. And I think a central bank digital currency in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like you said, it's that programmability aspect that could be combined with digital ID, social credit, and things to that effect that make it more sinister than it could just be. Because like you said, most things are already digital, most currency out there. With the Canadian trucker convoy situation, they did have to go through legislation to do the freezing process. So if you eliminate if you take this out, and I know this is just semantics, but if you put all this onto the private sector, you eliminate that. You just completely eliminate it, and you can freeze the people's money without even going through a legislative process.
Right. And again, that already happened. I mean, how many friends do we have? I've had bank accounts shut down prior to even getting into this situation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most people, frankly, at this point, most people I know have had a bank account canceled. But think about how much worse it's gotten just in the last, say, 7 years. And by the way, the KYC AML stuff now, you go in and try to set up a bank account. I remember I had this before in 2018. I actually ran for governor, and I went into a bank that I had previously had a large amount of money in. And I went to go create a political account for my campaign. And I had to go back 3 times and be interviewed under their Know Your Customer law. They ask you all these questions. So if you ever go into a situation where your banker's asking you things, what do you like to do? Where do you work? All this other stuff. They're not doing that to be friendly. It's actually something they have to do from a compliance perspective. So it took me 3 visits to a bank that I had already had a bank account with to go through them knowing me, even though it was the same banker I'd used. It's an absurd proposition. So yes, so we already have central bank digital currency. So the question is, how do you make people aware? I mean, you even go further. Look at all the restrictions that banks have on how much you can withdraw from ATMs. And by the way, I encourage everybody, go to your bank and try to withdraw all your cash today. See what happens.
Oh yeah.
They literally don't have the cash on hand. And if you trigger, if it's 5,000 or 10,000, whatever the dollar amount is, you have to fill out FinCEN forms. You have to go through this whole elaborate process. And the banks, by the way, obviously money's not backed by gold anymore, but we even got rid of fractional reserves in 2020 with COVID.
Zero reserve requirement. Yep.
We have zero reserve requirement. So these banks have nothing. And what are they counting on to be able to fulfill deposit withdrawal requests? The money coming in from commercial real estate, residential real estate, credit cards, auto loans, student loans, all of which are reaching bubble default levels. So when I ran for president, I had a shirt that I would wear. And my whole thing was, don't vote for me. My shirt said, bank run now, right? Halt CBDCs, stop World War III, end the Fed, with one thing. If people took their money, fiat, out of the bank, and not just in a 1930s, I've got bags full of cash, but exchange your fiat for, gold, for crypto, silver, and start using that. 2 or 3% of people do that, and it's over. Like literally because of the leverage in the system and everything else. That is how quickly this could happen. And there you go.
I got mine too.
You got yours too. So this is the way to stop it. And there is the question of how much detail do I need to go into explaining the different aspects of this. I mean, again, whether it's a stable coin or not, but all people have to do is read the legislation. I happen to think that they'll be able to get a CBDC passed. I actually talked to Ted when I was running for president. I talked to Loomis. I talked to Ted Cruz. I talked to all these people. I talked to Vivek. I talked to all these other politicians. And, here's the thing. It would be very easy to pass a CBDC in an emergency. If we have a terrorist attack, if we have the Republicans could use immigration. Attack,
the banking system goes down. The weird thing, the internet things that we've been seeing happen lately. There's all kinds of things kind of adding up to where you're going.
Exactly. Social Security, 2.9 billion accounts, right? So let's look at this. So how hard would it be? We got the Patriot Act 45 days after 9/11. We got TARP 18 days after Lehman Brothers collapsed. We got the $2.2 trillion CARES Act with all of its surveillance systems 16 days after COVID was declared a pandemic on a voice-only vote. There are people in Congress still today that voted for all three of these things. So if you say to me, there's no political will, people don't want CBDCs, I say ridiculous. It will be simple to pass in an emergency. And frankly, at any point right now, we have so much instability going on. Any number of things could trigger this. So I think it's very possible we get a central bank digital currency. But more importantly, we know they've developed the tech. I think people have to understand. And one of the things that connected Roger's book to my book is Roger's book goes from kind of the inception of Bitcoin to 2017. And I highly recommend this book. I've taken a lot of flack for it. And
I recommend it constantly myself, my friend.
I take it with me. I got 100 copies, and when I go to events, I either give it to people or sell it at cost, whatever to spread the word. It's an important book, and it talks about how Bitcoin was clearly hijacked, and whoever is controlling and paying the developers in an open source project controls the project, and that is very clearly the case with hijacking Bitcoin. And you have people that are tied to the military, the intelligence community that have funded changes to Bitcoin. You have the Bitcoin core developers that went off to form Blockstream, who make money based on the fact that the layer one for Bitcoin is slow and expensive. So they have their crony financial interests. But what I found was the most fascinating is that Bitcoin had been funded as a community project through the Bitcoin Foundation until 2015. And when that stopped, right as this transition went from peer-to-peer digital cash to store of value in digital gold, MIT took over as the funding source for Bitcoin. And the head of that MIT group, Joy Ito, who received funding from Jeffrey Epstein, he funded all three US CBDC pilots. So my book kind of parts of it pick up where Roger ends, which is it's clear it was hijacked up to 2017. But I mean, this thing's been hijacked more than Pan Am because it's ongoing. They keep on So the story is this: keep Bitcoin slow and expensive while building a CBDC that can now do 1.8 million transactions per second. And you mentioned the fact that I take a multi-coin approach. I take a multi-coin, multi-asset approach. And here's why. If they roll out CBDCs in an emergency, we can't stop the fact that this problem reaction solution works, right? Either create or take advantage of a problem. You get a fear reaction, and then you storm in with a solution when people are in this fearful state. That always works, by the way. The only thing that we can do is when the emergency happens and people are fearful is provide them an alternative that is equal to or better than what they're being offered. And in order to be able to do this, there are some really interesting facts, and this is why I'm multi-coin. The retail CBDC can do 1.8 million transactions per second. The current US financial system can do 50, 60,000 transactions per second. Bitcoin is still at 7 transactions per second. Even when you pick certain coins, everybody's like, well, I like Monero, I like this. I don't care. Add all of them together. We still need all of them together and more capacity to be able to onboard a lot of people. Or otherwise, when that emergency happens, then it's going to be like December of 2017 all over again. And if you were in Bitcoin in December of 2017, when usage spiked, when people started using it for retail and they decided not to increase the block size, all of a sudden transaction fees were $50. It took 8 days to clear a transaction. What would be like that for all of crypto? So we need a multi-coin approach. But one of the things that's changed even in my own thinking is we need privacy by default, because we now know what they're building from a CBDC perspective. And it's not an open ledger, and it's not a permissionless system. It is a centralized, controlled system. And to the extent, if we're using open ledgers, things like Bitcoin, well, they can now track people's transactions. And it's not long before, we're going to require you to report your self-custody crypto to the IRS, and it's not long before you have to register your crypto and it will be put on a whitelist or a blacklist. So we need privacy by default. And this is just what we have to do to be able to fight it, to be able to engage in voluntary commerce, knowing what they've already designed and built and what their plans are.
The way that I put it with the Bitcoin situation is Bitcoin in its current form is not a threat to the system, but a scaled Bitcoin certainly is. And I think that's also a reason to keep it in the situation that it's in, so that it isn't that threat, so that it doesn't offer an alternative to what's going to be introduced, which makes a lot of sense. The fungibility part is obviously another one that's really important. I mean, I've interviewed Charlie Lee from Litecoin, and they've added the Mimblewimble MWeb extension to allow for that fungibility, because my Bitcoin is not the same as your Bitcoin. My dollar, US dollar, is the same as your US dollar. I mean, there's no real difference attached to that. But the idea that I could own a Bitcoin today, and this Bitcoin could have been used in what the government could consider to be nefarious activity. It could be flagged in some capacity. And it has nothing to do with me, but because I'm the one who ends up like hot potato, I'm the one who's kind of screwed because I have this tainted coin. And I could see how exchanges could recognize that, just seizure stuff. The other thing too, when you mentioned Loomis, and then who's calling herself the Bitcoin senator, and then Trump talking about self-custody, is just trying to explain to people, almost like what you were saying, is that the self-custody is gonna come at the price of KYC AML, so they can still do their tracking and tracing. So yeah, they'll let you hold your own keys, but you're gonna have to identify yourself, citizen. And that's just unfortunately the direction that we're headed. And that's the smoke and mirrors game that's going on in the politics. And yeah, people are like, ooh, laser eyes. She must be for us. Not realizing, like you said, look at a lot of her bills. Like a lot of the stuff that she was working on with Gillibrand is like all basically AML, KYC, AML related stuff. So
it is, and I've read all of her bills, and I'm going to do a lengthy article breaking down all of this because it needs to be done, because I think some people just don't know. I mean, I have actually joked about this. If you put together the Bitcoin Freedom Bill, but the text of the bill said we're going to round up everybody that has self-custody crypto and throw them into the gas chamber, people would still be cheering it on because they don't read the bill.
no,
I mean, and we know this through click wrap agreements. People sign click wrap agreements, 150 to 400 agreements a year. Somebody did a study where they actually put in language that said, literally you have to give up your firstborn, and we're going to give all your data to the NSA. And I think 74% of people actually signed the click wrap agreement because, of course, they didn't read it. If you read Loomis's bills and even her statements, she is explicitly anti-privacy. She has said she will only support open, transparent blockchain. This is horrible. And by the way, I've said this recently in the past week. I mean, we are at DEFCON 1 because now there's a chance that we get crypto legislation before the end of this year. And I guarantee you, Gillibrand Loomis, that bill is the best case scenario. Chuck Schumer came out yesterday after this Harris thing and said, oh, well, the Senate is going to pass something this year. So they're going to build on Gillibrand Loomis, and they're going to make it worse. And Gillibrand Loomis is already a disaster. So we could have bad legislation by the end of this year. But Trump said what? In the first 100 days, he's going to pass crypto legislation, clear rules of the road. I guarantee you, if you're interested in privacy, if you're interested in voluntary exchange, the clear rules of the road will not be your friend.
yeah, no, I couldn't agree with that any more than 100%. It's that's why at this point, I mean, I really try not to pay attention to this political game, but it's obviously hard with everything that's going on and how much it actually affects our day-to-day lives. But it's honestly a travesty of what's happened to our nation and where we're at, and the crossroads of where we could go, and the fact that we can stop it if people just get on board. When enough people take a stand, nothing can stand against the people, and we can peacefully change the world. Like some of the things that you talk about, and this reminds me of what I'm about to bring up. And tell me how you think. Two things. Tell me how you think you can combat this. One, have you seen situations where, and I'm not sure the specific individuals, will go out and do like man on the street interviews, have a chocolate bar and a silver coin, go interview people and ask them, if I'm going to give you one of these two things, which do you want, the chocolate bar or the silver coin? And most people would take the chocolate bar, not the silver coin. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's kind of the old marshmallow experiment or whatever that they did. I didn't even know, decades ago, with kids to try to see delayed gratification and who would be willing to get 2 marshmallows in an hour versus 1 now. And this is a problem, right? I actually had an interesting engagement on a Twitter space with somebody who said, we're so dopamine addicted now because of our devices and everything that And he said something interesting, which I disagree with it, but I'd never heard it said that way, which is that, well, we're living in the moment. And I don't necessarily think being addicted to the dopamine response on social media is living in the moment, but
No.
maybe it is. But the point is that if you would have told me 4 years ago that COVID tyranny isn't even a political issue, it's not even a top 10 issue, that nobody's even talking about it, I wouldn't have believed you. I wouldn't have believed that lockdowns and mandates and business closures and vaccines and everything else would be something that people would not even have as a political issue. And yet it is, because we move from one issue to another. So it is the problem part of this is people don't know how the current system works. And so when we talked about, well, what is really the difference between what we have right now and what everybody's worried about in terms of a programmable CBDC, it's not much of an actual change. Only 8% of people are already using cash. So how do you get the average population to know or care about this? And will they? I think they'll roll it out in an emergency where people don't have a choice, which is why they're cracking down on crypto. This isn't going to be hey, have a medium fry or a donut like they did with the COVID vaccine. You're not going to have a choice. You either take this or you lose your money. And most people will simply take it, which is why the only way out of this is we actually have to build a solution that is as good or better than what they're offering. And this is something I put on my website. It's DEFCON 1, and I don't want to build this myself. I will if I have to. But the limiting factor right now that's preventing us from stopping CBDCs is a point of sale system for merchants that takes multiple assets that's easy to use. This is actually the biggest bottleneck. And some interesting facts. In last month, only 0.4% of Americans use crypto to buy or sell something. This has actually been on the decline. A couple of years ago, we were at 2%. Now we're at 0.4%. People are not using these alternatives as cash. This narrative of HODL and store of value and don't spend has taken over. So when the emergency happens, we don't have merchants that can accept these alternative currencies. So what we need is something that's easy to use, that's open source, that can't be shut down through a corporate structure, that can onboard. We need a life raft in an emergency that's as easy to use as the existing alternatives. And if I will say this, I think most of crypto is, and I get it, I've been in tech, I've been using computers since I was 5, but it's 20-year-old dudes developing tech for 20-year-old dudes. A lot of this is almost it's like being in a clique. It's like if you can figure out how to use Lightning, you're in the in crowd. And if you can't figure out how to use Lightning, then have fun staying poor. And the thing is, money is for everyone. Money should be easy to use. There should be no IQ requirement. This is about it's a medium of exchange that allows people to engage in trade. It's that simple. And we need tools. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I was trying to get at it in the way of, if you offer something, we have to offer something that it actually has to be a better product. It's not enough that it's just money separated from state. We've had 15 years of that, and we're at 0.4%.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying about people spending their crypto. It's what is it, Gresham's law, and because of the store of value, by spending your Bitcoin on everyday transactions, you're technically potentially losing out on future value. Which I get the argument on both sides. And I know that what the white paper, Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, was intending this to be a peer-to-peer cash system, to be utilized as an alternative.
So Gresham's law and what is the Lindy, all of these, I'm going to do another thing if I find time, taking all the propaganda, all of the books about Bitcoin, the Bitcoin standard and everything else, all of these economic theories that people are throwing out there. Even Gresham's law doesn't actually hold up. It isn't like a fundamental truth of the universe. Gresham's law doesn't always pan out.
Right.
But on top of that, not only does it not always pan out, it's great propaganda, but none of these economic theories contemplate the surveillance state and programmable digital money. Nothing contemplates that. So if you've got a theory from 50 years ago or 100 years ago or 200 years ago that has maybe been hit or miss accurate, but now you're holding on to it like it's one of the 10 commandments or it's some absolute principle of physics, you're going to be badly damaged. And so as a result of this, I mean, Bitcoin isn't money, right? You could argue it's a store of value, but if they launch CBDCs tomorrow and people are like, oh, I got to rush to use Bitcoin. Now I'm going to spend my Bitcoin because the dollar's gone. What are the fees going to be? $20,000, $30,000?
Yeah. If it's what we have today, yeah, it's going to be ridiculous. The Bitcoin that we have today is going to be completely ridiculous. The other example I wanted to give, aside from the man on the street situation, is, and I'm sure you've heard this said before in regards to gasoline. There's been a lot of times people say, well, if all the Americans would not get gasoline for one day, how much we could affect the oil industry. We can't even get like a small percentage of people to do something that simple. And I try to have faith in people. But what kind of numbers do you think it's going to take for us to accumulate to actually make an effect using counter economics and alternative currencies against the dollar?
So I think it's a complicated answer, but it was I was at a Red Pill Expo and I listened to G. Edward Griffin, and he actually gave an interesting talk that relates to something that I've learned in startups. A book by, I believe, Jeffrey Moore called "Crossing the Chasm," and this idea is you have basically 1% who are innovators, who then influence 3% who are the early adopters, and then that 3% then influences the 15%, which are the early majority. And that's actually how we won the Revolutionary War. We didn't win the Revolutionary War with a majority of the people, and the sequence of this isn't. You don't start with 15%. You go in a very sequenced way. You have to get that 1% first. You get the hardcore innovators. And what I think, and that's what I'm trying to do. So when I do these workshops, I'm trying to empower people. I wrote the book to be a standalone book where when you read this book, at the end, you should know how to download a wallet and to start using these things in your daily life. And now, by the way, it needs to be updated. But what I found was people were reading the book and they said, wow, I'm scared and I'm worried about CBDCs, but I haven't been able, I've just been too fearful to take that first step to get crypto or to even get gold or silver in physical custody. And so that's why I do the workshops, so that people walk out of the workshop with a wallet and they actually have crypto in it. And then they actually have a gold back. And then they have a game plan. And now they're part of a community of people that can share information. And now this is our 1%. This is how we're building that 1%. So, I mean, the short answer is the way that we do it is we get the 1% first, and then we get the 1% to get the 3%. And if we do it in that way, so I'm not trying to reach a mass market audience. It would be a waste of time for me to be on mainstream TV talking about this, because people are 2 levels or 3 levels removed from kind of this kind of thinking. But they'll follow along when the time is right and there are enough early adopters where they can actually look to something. So I think that's what we need to do strategically. So right now it's that 1%. The problem is that we've been scattered into 20,000 parts, right? So think about how well this would have been working if there weren't 20,000 coins, but we actually had one coin. Not that I even necessarily agree with, like, conceptually one. You should always have kind of competition, but nevertheless, we've been fragmented. So we've never gotten to the point where we can cross the chasm because we've been fighting amongst ourselves. And it's been really effective. You find me something that's been divided into 20,000 pieces in 15 years. That's incredible.
Well, and it's great because I've heard you say this. Let me see if I can pull up a website. And I did find the Amazon. I don't know why I couldn't find it when I looked for it before. I used your name and everything. I was going to pull up something. What were we just talking about? I apologize.
We're talking about the crossing the chasm and kind of getting from 1% to 3% to trying to and crypto being divided into 20,000 different pieces.
Oh, how many cryptos there are, because that number has massively increased since the number that you're talking about. And let me see if I'm pulling this up correctly. Let me pull up the other version. I have CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko, so we can look at both of them in comparison. Because, and actually, what's really nice is CoinGecko is a little bit more moderate about it. So if you look at CoinMarketCap, they're saying 2.4 plus million cryptos. 2.4 million cryptos. Okay.
Whoa.
Now, if you go to CoinGecko, it's saying 15,000. I'm not sure like what the difference and how they judge it, because it used to be easier to get listed on CoinGecko than it would be to get listed on CoinMarketCap. So it's kind of crazy that CoinMarketCap has that number. But I mean, with the fact that you can create all these meme coins and all this, I mean, there's probably more than 15,000 meme coins out there.
Yep. And they crack down on ICOs, but nobody's going after meme coins. Why? Because people are divided. So while people are creating hot dog coin on Solano, MIT and the Federal Reserve of New York are building platforms to tokenize all real world assets. They know we're divided. And the problem is, like, people actually think that they're getting ahead. Oh, I'm optimizing my fiat value. You're going to be crushed. Everybody's going to be crushed. And it's very difficult to communicate this. There's a quote that I like to read, though, about kind of explaining the situation, because this is all about strategy, right? How do we do this? Because a lot of people are like, oh, well, the majority of people won't move. And again, they're not going to. You got to get the early adopters. But there's this guy named Dr. Charles Tart who said, when an audience is presented with a theory that is one level above their understanding, they find it inspiring. When the information is 2 levels above their comprehension, they fall asleep. At 3 levels, they become angry. And when the data reaches 4 levels above the level of the audience, they want to kill the presenter. And I mean, I think that's actually true. And that actually fits kind of the crossing of the chasm. So we need to find the people that are 1 level above in understanding, that are inspired by these ideas. But we need to do an effective job of organizing. And it's tough, because if you're a pro-liberty person, it's like, all right, well, it does require some organization. So but I do think it can be done. And one thing that surprised me, and I think your audience might find interesting. So when I do these workshops, most of the people that I'm talking to, I've traveled to 22 states now, giving various talks. I haven't done 22 workshops, but I've gone to 22 states giving general talks, like an hour-long talk, and then I've done the workshops as well. Most people outside of the echo chamber have never even heard of the idea that you can use cryptocurrencies for commerce. They only think the use case is as a speculative asset. And because I do a poll when I go through my presentation, more people have heard of Sam Bankman-Fried than Satoshi Nakamoto. True story. And so when you drill into, and most people have a negative opinion of it, even as a speculative investment. Now, that's the audience that I'm dealing with. And these are not stupid people either. What I've found, by the way, the target market for this isn't, I mean, as much as we battle within our own community, people are kind of entrenched, they're locked into their own coins. But 99% of the world out there has not used crypto. Like, the whole universe is open to us. And where I have found there's interest, this group that is, it's 1 level above where they're inspired. There are a lot of boomers, and there are people that were radicalized by COVID tyranny that for the first time, because of inflation, started to ask themselves, what is the Federal Reserve and how does money work? These are people that actually have money. They have assets, but they've never touched a crypto wallet at all. But they're fired up and they're pissed off. So when I do these workshops, I may be in front of 100 people, 200 people, 300 people at a time. And what I say is this: try onboarding 100 boomers to crypto with a wallet. No matter how simple you make it, a faucet with a QR code. And by the way, it's not, I'm not in any way trying to make fun of them, because they're already using digital currency. Everybody's using digital currency. These people are already using Apple Pay. They're using Google Pay. This isn't something to be smug about. This is something to say, we are losing in the marketplace because our solutions aren't good. Everybody in these workshops already comes with a predisposition to wanting to explore alternative currencies. And the challenge is the ease of use. So we have to focus on user interface. We need to focus on creating better products, but people will use these products because they're already using digital currency. So I believe the biggest gating item that we have is the actual product itself and the usability of the product. How do we get something for a merchant where the alternative currencies that they can accept represent enough buying power to be something that will influence their business? How do we get coins that have enough combined transactions per second to be able to compete with CBDCs in an emergency? How do we get a selection of coins that have low enough transaction fees that can settle quickly enough that they can compete with Venmo, Zelle, Apple Pay, Google Pay, and soon to be X payments? That's it. We just need to focus on the solution. It's, we're also dealing with regulators and we're dealing with the force of the state. But to me, using those as excuses doesn't make any sense if our product isn't better. When I first got Bitcoin in 2012, it was a magical experience because of the startups that I've worked on in the past. Both of my startups had issues with banks and with credit card processing and with checks and everything else. It was a constant annoyance. in terms of fees. And it actually was one of the reasons my second company went under, which is a whole other thing. So when I first used Bitcoin, I'm like, this is better, faster, cheaper money, right? It was nearly free, nearly instant, and there's no bank and there's no third party. Wow, this is great. But that was 2012. Well, since 2012, Venmo and Zelle and Google Pay and Apple Pay, those things didn't exist in 2012. They do now. But is the user experience any better than the experience that I had in 2012? It is not. I will tell you, it's actually not better at all than it was 12 years ago. That is the big problem that we need to address, in my opinion. And if we don't address that, we will fail. We absolutely will fail if the product isn't good.
No, I agree. We definitely need to have ease of use and simplicity for that, because when I think about older people and remote controls, like when we start having programmable remotes, do you remember how many problems that older people would have programming those things? So yeah,
Yep.
it's the ease of use, I think, that's going to make it. It's when people are able to use these technologies without even actually realizing that they're using these technologies that's going to make that mainstream jump, in my opinion.
It is, and I saw something and I posted on it yesterday. If by the way, if my electricity might go, there's some major thunderstorm just rolled in here. So if
That's cool. I mean,
I'll let you know if that
it
if
could
I
be
get
by
shut off, I
design.
will log. Yeah, believe me.
I mean, I had construction because we've had to, I mean, just so people are aware, I've had to reschedule with Aaron twice now because of power outages and construction that's going on outside of my house. So, but I had the internet go out the week before that. I was telling you, my friend Crypto Blood, his internet went out yesterday. We're recording this on the 15th of August. I'm going to be releasing this. It's Thursday, and I'm going to be releasing this publicly the following Monday, so people are aware of like where we're at in time. But yeah, man, it wouldn't surprise me if there's a geoengineered storm to try to prevent the rest of our interview from taking place. But if you happen to disappear, I understand why. And I do want to say, I definitely want to have more conversations because I don't feel like we can encompass everything in one. And
No.
you did mention something in responding to a post that I made on X about possibly wanting to contribute to the channel, which I would love to have you. If you want to put some videos out on my channel, you're definitely more than welcome to do that. And we could talk more about that. So I figured I would just get that out of the way just in case something happens with the electricity.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I would love to do that, because I'm going to be producing more Brownstone content, and the stuff that I do at Brownstone, I mean, I shit post and I do a lot smaller articles, on X, but I save for Brownstone the stuff that's thoughtful, that, requires research, where if I put it out there, it's something that can be meaningful, that, people will refer to. But what I've realized is I'd like to actually do a video kind of and walk through each article and then actually have some interaction on that, because
That's cool.
that'll help to get the information. And I've got a lot more information coming out. And
real quick, I want to notate that this article, and this is just one article that Aaron has written, and I can say most of them are like this. It says here it's a 41-minute read, and it will take you almost an hour to listen to this if you listen to it at regular speed. So this is a very, very in-depth article, and there's lots of information, lots of articles that Aaron has written just like this. I guess they can go to the Brownstone Institute and search your name, and maybe all your articles will come up.
Yeah, that's what you can do. And I've actually,
and
I've only written, well, you actually go to, I don't even know if that's going to show up there. You can go through the menu and see a list of authors, and that's probably go to, I think to the about menu.
About contributing authors.
Contributing authors, yeah, contributing authors.
Oh, look, you're the first one. I guess because it's in alphabetical order. You lucked out with a double A.
I absolutely lucked out. That's actually a huge win, because there are a lot of people that are contributing writers, as you'll see, and some great people, incredible people at Brownstone. So
yeah,
again, I recommend checking this stuff out in general, on a whole host of topics. I'm really the first one going out. I mean, besides Jeffrey Tucker himself, who of course is expert on all things economics, but most of the rest of it has been focused on a lot of the COVID stuff and medical stuff. So I'm kind of leading the charge out here, but I put a lot of time into these articles because it's because of my interaction with people all over the country and getting feedback, where I'm like, okay, I need to just lay this all out in one article. This is based on all of the questions that I get and everything else. So I don't put out a lot of articles historically, but when I do, they're larger. But I am going to be putting out more articles because we're at a critical point here in the next 80 days. And again, I hate the politics part of it, but what I saw happen since Bitcoin Nashville is they're going to screw up. They're going to pass a crypto bill, or they're actually going to try to pass a crypto bill. And we do not want a crypto bill. Let's be very clear. There is no good crypto bill that is possible. Any crypto bill will be bad. And we already know what the starting point is with what they're putting together. But I want to go back to one thing. So because I commented yesterday on the CEO of Circle, which had put out USDC, the stablecoin.
Jeremy Allaire?
Jeremy Allaire.
Okay.
And he put out a post announcing, Apple Touch Pay with USDC. And it was heralded as like, this is the pinnacle of crypto. And I wrote a scathing response to this because I want to think about this. And part of this is the importance of framing and people understanding that the entire purpose of this was peer-to-peer digital cash, people being able to buy and sell things without third parties, cheap and fast. That's it. Very simple. We do not have that. But what USDC is with Touch to Pay, let's think about what goes on with this. You have Apple, a company that is known to censor people and can be clearly controlled and manipulated, involved in the process where you have to get approval. Then you have a wallet app that can be hacked. Then you have USDC and all of their investors, which are creating a tokenized version of fiat. Let's recall, fiat is itself the problem. We are adding so many middlemen and intermediaries here. And in my post, I kind of outlined what some of them are. But I mean, in terms of like this thing is a smorgasbord of intermediaries. And then you have on top of that, you're tokenizing fiat. And then the fiat itself, I think I heard, and this may not be accurate, that Circle had like $3 billion at Silicon Valley Bank prior to the collapse. So, $250,000 was insured. So these stable coins are not the answer to anything. The problem
it's the answer to to America continuing their debt slavery system, because they can get rid of the physical dollars and back the stable coins with just treasuries, like treasury bonds. So you can get rid of the actual dollar itself and just make it all synthetic.
Yes. So this is not a win. And I'm seeing the people in the comments like, this is a great step forward. Like, this is a gigantic step backwards. This is as anti peer-to-peer digital cash as you could get, but it's convenient.
Have you seen this?
I haven't, but I'm not surprised. I
believe this was yesterday too. So yeah, it was yesterday. MetaMask partners with MasterCard to launch a crypto-backed debit card. So that's in Europe now. But again, that's just another way of identifying people and their crypto addresses to help with the chain analysis process.
Yeah. All of it is tracked. So this is so I'm going back to, we need something that works as easily as USDC Touch by Pay, but that is decentralized. And so reasonably, because a lot of times people will make excuses. Well, privacy coins, because it's private, they're going to be harder to use. No, it has to be, the mantra has to be, we need to spend our resources figuring out design, figuring out user interface, because it can be done. All of this stuff can be done. There just hasn't been a concerted focus on it. It hasn't been recognized as an issue. So I think that in order to beat this, we have to actually, again, go back to focusing on products. But we are really behind. Like we can win this, but we have to be honest about how far behind we are in all of this. And I mean, you said earlier, you said very nice things, and I appreciate it, about kind of taking the risk in doing this. But to me, it's not a risk, because to me, the default in all of this is digital tyranny. If we don't stop this, then the default is that we don't have free will. We'll have our behavior controlled through social credit systems. So to me, that is the default. So it's not a risk at all.
That will usually detour people from continuing. That's why I had to say something about it, because when you have that kind of situation hanging over your head and you have other people in your life, a family, a wife, kids, you have more than yourself to think about. So that's why most people wouldn't.
Well, what kind of future are my 14-year-old twins going to have if they have a social credit system and CBDCs? Right?
I agree.
What kind of opportunity? That is the way that I look at it. And I wish, and I take it profoundly seriously that people like Ian and Roger, especially when people who have been promoting these things because their intent is to spread freedom, those are the people that need to be defended the most and supported the most. And I mean, for me, I'm in New Hampshire. I go to court hearings and I record people all the time. And, this is part of the ethos of being a free stater. If you're part of the Free State Project, you're going to see your friends. I mean, if you're busy with family and kids and everything else, you're going to see your friends a couple times a year. You're going to see them at Pork Fest, and then you're going to see them in a court hearing. I mean, that's just kind of the way of life here, and that is what that is. But yeah, no, we've got to stand behind the people that have been on the front lines pushing this stuff, because it is hard to be on the front lines doing this, but it doesn't take many of us to make things happen. Again, it's just starting that 1%, because most people are passive and are apathetic. So it's the 1% that actually is going to drive whichever direction things go in. So might as well be on the 1% that's moving towards decentralization and freedom.
Now realize I'm not doubting what you're trying to achieve. I'm not trying to minimize it. I just want to and trying to ask some questions I think people who are watching would want to ask by listening to what we're saying. Like, how are we going to get the numbers to really make this change? Because if what happens with the dollar that I think is going to happen and just ends up being used everywhere around the world, I'm not sure how much of an effect. It's a little bit different in, I guess, a kinetic war situation versus a monetary situation where you're such a small percentage of the entirety that you don't really technically affect it, because there's still so many other people utilizing it. But again, that doesn't give any reason not to build these things and not to try to show people the way forward versus where they're trying to usher us.
But I would say 1% can actually tear down the entire system because of how over leveraged it is. So understand that they're working they're working on the emergency to roll out their solution, but they're not ready yet. So I actually saw something that you posted yesterday, the Alex Jones, Bill Hicks thing. And Alex Jones infuriates me, because last year when Silicon Valley Bank was collapsing, he brought Michael Flynn on his show, and they told everybody to keep their money in the banks, because if you take your money out of the banks, we're going to get CBDCs faster. And that was 100% dead wrong, false information. The only way we stop CBDCs is by getting people to exit the banks before it's a controlled demolition. Either it's going to collapse no matter what. Is it going to collapse on our terms where we can use alternatives, or is it going to collapse when they've got their system in place after they've thrown all of our friends in jail and after they've regulated everything? That is what is at stake here. And when he did that, I thought that it actually changed my, I am wondering his motivation and intent. And he's had some great information in the past, but I've noticed that he always tends to promote as the solution inactivity and supporting white knights. And we're not going to vote our way. No one's going to save us but ourselves. So any action that isn't, well, I'll put it this way. We make 35,000 decisions a day. From whether we're going to read an article, whether we're going to post something, brush our teeth, what we're going to eat, exercise, etc. And now everybody is sitting around focused on what we're going to do 80 days from now in a meaningless election to pick a slaveholder mascot that's going to be a front for a technocratic agenda, right? So 35,000 decisions every day, but we're going to focus on that one. And sorry to rant on this, but I think Jones put out a lot of great information, but now what he's doing is he's suggesting people don't take agency and don't take responsibility for their immediate actions that they can take. So that
would make sense though if you're reading between the lines with the post that I was saying. Because are you familiar with who Bill Hicks was?
Oh yeah, Bill Hicks is great. I love Bill Hicks.
The idea that Bill Hicks died and Alex Jones was created, there's a lot to that theory. And if you think about that, let's say he was recruited by the government. Agent Bill Hicks was recruited by the government to play this character known as Alex Jones, which gets to be one of the biggest controlled opposition people that we have. And I'm pretty sure if you realize that they're targeting liberty-minded people and people like Tornado Cash and Samurai, that they're also going to be planting controlled opposition people into the crypto space, like your Michael Saylors, like those kind of people.
Yeah,
that are trying to
all of
take
them.
away the
Yeah.
freedom narrative of what Bitcoin is, try to keep it that store of value, be all good with the ETFs and the banking system, hijacking the crypto space. You know, yeah, there's a lot. We definitely have
Yeah.
so much to talk about.
Yeah, yes, and no, so we have Michael Saylor, who was a contractor for the CIA and the NSA, and whose office is 10 minutes from the Pentagon. So
Yeah,
we have him now as the
he's
front.
in McLean, Virginia. McLean.
I believe so. And one of the videos that I show, and I actually
Tyson's
put in my
Corner. Tyson's Corner. Sorry, that's
Tyson's
right. Yeah.
Corner, yeah. One of the videos that I put in my workshop is it's like a 3.5 minute clip. And it shows the first half of it is Roger Ver from 2012, from the very first time I ever heard him talk at a Free State event called Liberty Forum, talk about how Bitcoin was, if you're sick of wars and you're sick of central banks spreading, murder and all this other stuff, use Bitcoin. To then the Michael Saylor piece, which is about Michael Saylor saying we comply with KYC, we pay our taxes, we don't compete with Visa, MasterCard, the euro, or the dollar. Like it's been completely hijacked. And actually that I used that video because it sums up everything that anybody needs to know about what happened to Bitcoin. But realistically, so where are we? So Michael Saylor's on CNBC, Michael Saylor is on all the mainstream media, and Roger conveniently was thrown in the same prison as McAfee, and is now, while he's out on bail, he's not in a position where he can talk. He's been silenced
Yeah.
right after, shortly, a few months after BlackRock starts selling an ETF, and a few weeks after he releases his book on hijacking Bitcoin. So,
Yeah.
so we need help. So I'm trying to do whatever I can, but I only have my voice is only whatever my voice is. So like we need as many people amplifying these messages, because the people that we have that were on the front lines that probably spread these ideas of peer-to-peer digital cash to more people than anyone else, Roger and people like Ian Freeman, the state has gone after them. So like we need to replicate, we need to have 1,000 people, 10,000 people out sharing the message about this, because people don't know. And I try not to get angry about it in the sense that, look, if you're somebody that just got exposed to Bitcoin, and I get them all the time on social media, they're repeating the Bitcoin standard stuff. They've got their list of memes and everything, and they don't know any better. They believe it, right? They're cutting their own hair and dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin so that they can be exit liquidity for Max Kaiser, and they don't know any better. They think that they're fighting the fight for freedom money. And so the only way to solve that is to actually get the other side of the story out there. And boy, they will shut it down. When I put out a review, I read Roger's book. I put out a short post the next day. So I got the book the day it came out, posted something on Twitter. Roger retweeted it, was immediately blocked by Adam Back, immediately blocked by Samson Now, immediately blocked by Luke Dash Jr. So the actual core devs themselves and the people that are involved with Blockstream immediately, and there was nothing controversial about what I said. I didn't even do I certainly have in other posts, but this was just hey, this book is, eye-opening. And, and I basically said, I remembered some of what was going on at the time, but once you see and read this book, which is filled with facts, and it's not even Roger's opinion. Most of the time, he's actually quoting the other side in their own words from publicly available interactions and emails, right? So it's just definitive. No one on the Bitcoin Maxi side engaged in the substance or the factual matter of the book. Instead, they literally immediately blocked. And part of what is in the book is the fact that the reason that small blockers won is because they use censorship and because they use propaganda, and they're doing it still. And it's effective because they blocked me. They blocked me in unison. So how do we get our word out? So we, and that is a bigger question of these tactics work, and they work politically as well. Right? The Democrats, people will argue, well, they didn't have a primary. Well, yeah, no, but the Democrats all rally behind their candidate. Their process wasn't democratic. So what? They're all going to line up and vote. She'll probably win. Right? So we can complain about the fact that their process isn't democratic, but then we have to actually look at the fact that, well, it wasn't democratic, but they're probably going to win. So what do we do with that? From my perspective, I don't want to use their tactics. I don't want to become them in the process, but then we still have this gray area of these tactics work. We may be right, but their tactics work. So we've got work to do. And I don't know what that answer is.
Well, that's where I think getting with the right people, and I think so far you've been doing that. I think it's maybe doing some roundtables, maybe having some private gathering meetings, online, in person. People like Raphael from Crypto Vigilante, who you've been on the show with, Derek Bros from the Conscious Resistance. I believe you just was recently on his show. They've both been on my show. So we're all like-minded people. Just, I think it'd be great for some of these thought leaders to get together and try to figure out a way to cohesively work together for the same agenda. Because I think listening to your conversation with Raf, I think he's basically on board with what you're trying to move forward with, educating people about and using crypto and trying to create these alternative agorist counter economic systems. So
yeah, and I actually did a follow-up interview with him that hasn't come out yet, and it was somewhat contested. He brought in Ed to talk about CBDCs from a different perspective, but we ended up at the end concluding, and I think this is true. So we need a product, right? We need a simple, easy to use product. But here's the other thing, and I'm writing an article about this. And it's shocking. We need to sell privacy. I mean, as a concept, because we obviously already understand the importance of privacy. And I mean, this is kind of a natural right kind of thing, right? But when you look at kids, and if you look at the younger generations, Cato did a survey and found that 35% of Gen Z would be okay with, or 33% would be okay with cameras in the home, government surveillance cameras in the home to monitor for domestic violence. We need to, so a lot of our movement is marketed as, and you know, some of our own behavior pushes this. It's the dark web, and it's this illicit stuff, and it's not illicit. Everybody deserves privacy, and everybody should want privacy, especially if they know what happens if the technocrats get their way. This isn't about buying illegal drugs on the black market. This is about whether you're going to be able to buy red meat, whether or not you're going to be able to drive your car more than 50 miles in a week. This is about whether you're going to be able to buy raw milk. This is about common everyday things that people do today that will become illegal through this technocratic surveillance system. And we agreed at the end of that, I don't know, are you going to be at Moneratopia?
I need to get stuff worked out for a passport, but I'm looking into it.
All right, it'd be great if you were there, because one of the things that we talked about
it's like mid-November in Mexico City.
Yeah, it's the 14th through the 17th. And one of the things we're going to try to put together is a roundtable to talk about how we market privacy, how we get beyond. So how do we get to the innovators? Because the people that I talk to, as I said, when I do these workshops, these are not people either of us would have been talking to at all 7 years ago, except if it were at a family event to get into an argument over the holidays, right? Look, truly.
Yeah.
But these are our people. This is this is how we get to the 3%. And these are health freedom groups. These are food freedom groups. These are, when you look at the UN Agenda 2030, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, find groups that are opposed to those 17 things. Those are our friends, right? The health freedom, a lot of these vaccine choice folks, they're ideologically aligned, but they're not technical. Most of them have never touched a crypto. And when you say to them, well, okay, you're interested in vaccine choice. Well, do you know, when we have CBDCs, they're just going to shut off your money if you don't get a vaccine. Once you explain that, now all of a sudden they're on board. So there are, and I've put together a whole list of, kind of at a national level, organizations where there are resonant values that if they understood profoundly what programmable CBDCs mean as it relates to their issue, they'll understand that this is the root of their issue. That if this is implemented, then their issue isn't even something they really have the ability to even advocate for anymore.
So true. So true. And another thing that, I mean, we definitely have that right to privacy. And I try to explain to people, you know, it's privacy should be privacy. We should all have that right. Like, and I like to use the example of an outhouse or a porta potty. If you had to use the bathroom and the porta potty was clear and you had to do a number 2, are you going to feel comfortable just sitting there on the toilet in the see-through porta potty while you're taking a dump? Most people aren't cool with that. You know, and it's like, I should be able to have the same thing with other parts of my life as well, not just have that privacy while doing a number 2. So it's just, and another thing too that I thought was really cool that and I want to expound on this in a future conversation, but privacy coins. And I'm starting to agree with your idea that we need to be utilizing privacy coins so that we do have that privacy by default.
Yeah. And by the way, this is new for me within the last 90 days, literally. So some interesting thing happens as you go through this process. So I got on board with the white paper. I fell in love with the white paper right, in 2012. And I fell in love with at least what I thought the white paper meant, which, by the way, might also have been wrong. I'm open to the idea that we applied libertarian philosophy to something that maybe wasn't even intended to be libertarian. I could go either way. I don't know the answer to that. But what I found is that everybody evaluates all other cryptos based on the individual elements of what went into Bitcoin. So it's like, oh, well, does it proof of work? Did it have a pre-mine or not? All of these little individual attributes, which I would say that what made Bitcoin interesting as a concept was how all of it worked together as an economic incentive system. But once you start taking away any of the individual components, or you start evaluating the individual components on their own, the individual components aren't necessarily the best way forward or the only way forward. It just so happened to work in the combination of different attributes that made up Bitcoin. To talk about how big of a shift this was, I spent 5 years playing around with BSV. And I get flack for it all the time, right? Even to this day. And people are like, well, why did you do this? Why? Because I realized we had to be able to have an alternative to CBDCs, that the current financial system does 50 to 60,000 transactions per second. The Bitcoin does 7, and BSV was doing 50,000 transactions per second. So I went to where the technology led me. Now, subsequently, in doing that, I even spoke to Craig Wright and others. They're trying to make it the CBDC. And then I started to question profoundly. I think one of the ideas behind this is to have a whole transparent system. Sounds great. It sounds great if governments are transparent, central banks are transparent. Think about all of these problems that are solved if it's transparent. But it was completely naive to think that central banks, the same central banks who will orchestrate both sides of a war, who will commit genocide just to collect a couple of extra percent, to think that those people are interested in the best technology or that they're interested in transparency is a faulty assumption, which, by the way, when you look at the CBDCs that are being rolled out, it's clearly not what they're interested in. So now we're in a situation where we know that the CBDCs they're developing are centralized and they're permissioned. So what that means for us is if we're sitting here saying, well, okay, let me get this straight. We're going to use something where all of our transactions are transparent. That's the thing that we're going to have that's going to compete with the thing that they're building that's centralized and permissioned. Well, under that context, that isn't going to fly, because now they're going to be able to identify who we are and censor our money and stop us so that they can roll out their system. So now the only way we fight back is privacy coins. And this is a big shift for me in the last 90 days. I was never I'd used privacy coins, but I was never privacy by default is critical. And it is because of the context that we're in and and what we're competing against with CBDCs. And so now it's actually jumped to a top priority. So.
But no, I like that, and like I said, I want to have a conversation where we can just focus on just private coins, because I know you've talked about tokenization of assets and using things like Xano as a way to combat that, which I think that it deserves its own conversation because there's so much to it, and I want to be respectful of your time and all the listeners as well, because we're at about an hour and 40 minutes, about an hour and 36.
Yep.
But yeah, I definitely want to get you back on. I want to expound on these things. I really wanted to kind of introduce you to the audience, my audience that watches my videos, and then kind of lay the groundwork for these future conversations. Before we do actually wrap things up, I would like to take an opportunity to, and again, everything that we talked about, I'm going to have linked down below in the video description. So make sure you guys are checking out Aaron's work. I'm going to pull up your webpage with the workshop information. Do you mind, because I see you have an event coming up in September. I'm not sure the date. And I see you have an event coming up in New Jersey. Do you mind telling people about what it is specifically? Because I think you said it's about a 4-hour workshop.
Sure. Yeah. We might actually change the one in Nashville because we had a venue fall through. So that one might not be until October. But we do have, and I'll put the link up today, in Central New Jersey on October the 5th, we're going to have a 4-hour workshop. And these workshops are based on the content of my book, although much enhanced and refined. But the first half of the workshop is me going through. And as you scroll down to the bottom there, it actually gives a bullet point list of what is covered in there. I basically discuss what's going on with CBDC development globally, what it means in the context of social credit systems and what's going on in, with the UN, and then other examples in places like China. I talk about CBDC development, not only globally and the rate of growth, because I will say that in 2020, and this is one of the things that really captured my attention when I started researching this. In 2020, there were only 35 countries at the research phase of CBDCs. So just 35 countries exploring. Fast forward 4 years, there are now 134 countries representing 98% of the world's GDP working on CBDCs at various levels. 11 have launched, 8 have actually gone back to pilot stage to make some adjustments, but they intend to roll it back out. There are now more, and that doesn't even include, they include China as a pilot. There are actually now more CBDC accounts globally than crypto accounts. The rate of growth here is what should alarm people. And this is why when I say we've been complacent, 0.4% use crypto for transactions. And the growth rate here is tremendous. And you have groups like the UN, the World Economic Forum, IMF, World Bank, Bank for International Settlements are working together, coordinating to develop policy guidelines and working to develop technology toolkits to implement these in countries all over the world. So this is happening at an alarming rate. So I will go in and explain that. I will explain fiat currency. I will explain that fiat currency doesn't work, and I will walk through kind of the stats on why every fiat currency in human history has failed. There are 7 main reasons for it, and then I'll show that the dollar is flashing bright red on all 7. And then that will lead into kind of a history of gold, history of silver, and the history of, not the full history of crypto, but an explanation of kind of the foundations of crypto in terms of, it was a focus on Bitcoin, a lot of it on how blockchain works, just the basics, because I'm typically talking to an audience that this is very new for. Then there's a break, and then the last half is actual hands-on. So we get people set up with a crypto wallet. We actually give them crypto. We actually set them up with a Zeno wallet and give them a privacy token, because again, the focus now is not only on stopping CBDCs, but it's on stopping this great taking. So I want people to actually have a privacy token in their possession. I give people a gold back. I give people 1/10 of an ounce of silver. I give them a copy of my book. So that's when and then I explain how I live off of these things, how you pay your bills, how you engage in transactions. I give them an overview of exactly how this works, so that when they walk out of there, they have these assets in their hands and they have a starting place to actually go and make their first transaction using alternative currency. Because to me, this is the point. The reason I'm doing these workshops is to get to that 1% and to get people to take action. And believe it or not, that it's so important to get people to make that first purchase using crypto. That changes the game entirely, because now you've moved it from the abstract to the concrete. So to me, this is, because you ask, well, how do we do this? This is the best way that I've come up to do this. And this is out of my conversations and traveling to 22 states and talking to people all over the country. This is what I came up with as the best way to actually get hands-on and to make it all happen. So the workshops are, again, it's intense, right? This is not like a social hour thing. This is like 4 hours of, there's a lot of content in there. But it's very empowering. And there was a Zero Hedge article written up from one of the attendees of the event. And there's a link to it on this page as well, or if you go to one of the cities, you'll actually see a link to the article where you can see from the perspective of an attendee what the event was like. So far, yeah, read full article on Zero Hedge. So there's been an article about this, and so to me now, and as you're listening to this, if you like this, I mean, fill out the form. The best way for me to capture where there's interest is you fill out the form. There are various forms on kind of every page, but indicating your interest and your location. Because just because there are 15 cities listed, it doesn't mean that we're limiting to that. I'm going to do as many of these workshops as I can, and I'm not going to stop until until there's some impediment that prevents me from doing these. So, but I also need help. So I'm doing this as a nonprofit. And so I'm not structuring these I'm not trying to optimize profit. I'm actually just trying to cover cost so that I can do as many of these as possible. And the way that this works is, it's me, my wife, and another friend of mine who I've worked with on things for 30 years, kind of doing the work on our side, but we have volunteers in each of the cities. So we set up groups in Signal, and we basically, the hardest part of this is venue selection. So if you want to help out and you know a venue or have access to a venue, indicate that on the form as well. And so, because that's what we're looking for. We're also looking for marketing partners to related organizations that can market the event to their members, and we'll give them a coupon code for $25 off the event. So that's been a very popular way to do this. And so we're trying to decentralize this as possible, keep the cost down as much as possible, and align ourselves with as many related groups. And we found libertarian groups, Republican groups, food freedom groups, health freedom groups, Second Amendment groups, you name it, are all aligned with this. And so if you represent one of those groups or know a group that might be interested in helping to either promote or host, please fill that out, because this is how we're going to make this happen. This is all organic. This is not a well-funded enterprise at all. I'm just bootstrapping this and reinvesting everything to get the word out.
I appreciate it. And that's why I wanted to put a little bit of emphasis about what you are doing with these workshops, so that if people want to help and support what you're doing or attend, they know how to do so. Because again, all this information that we've shared today is going to be linked down below. You can find this at daylightfreedom.org. I'm also going to have a link for the book if you guys want to check out the final countdown. But as Aaron said, if you attend one of his workshops, you're going to get a copy of the book. You're going to leave with cryptocurrency, with some gold, and with some silver, which I think is genius idea, my friend. Completely genius. And then if you're not following Aaron over on the X side, I definitely would encourage you to follow him at Aaron R. Day. And again, this will all be linked down below, as well as Aaron's Rumble channel. So before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts, anything else that you want to add to this conversation?
I would just stress the urgency of this, and the urgency is driven by the fact that it's current government policy to pursue a CBDC, and now politicians on both sides are looking to pass legislation. So the only way out isn't political; it's through direct action. But time is not on our side. The only thing that we have on our side is speed. So we actually have to act immediately on this. So the other thing I would say is I want to get on as many shows as I can and as many podcasts as I can. And everything has been organic so far. So, I mean, again, there's no marketing team or anybody pushing anything out. So anybody that has any thought, the best way to do it is if you recommend, is if somebody that watches, that's a viewer of a podcast, recommends it. That is 100% the best way to do it, and to do it all organically. So if you're like, oh, Aaron should be on this show, please make the recommendation in the introduction. I'm happy to go on and get the word out.
After a couple of people mentioned your name and wanted to see us together, I had to make sure that I looked into who you were, and I was like, yeah, we definitely got to have this conversation. So I do appreciate you making time to do it. Thank you for working with me with the rescheduling. Again, the invitation is open for you to be able to put some content out on my channel. The only thing I would, and we can talk about this privately, the only thing I would make sure that just try to be careful and not get my channel taken down. That would be all I ask.
Yep. I hear you.
I speak a lot more freely on the Rumble and X sides when I do live streaming. Sometimes I'll actually do a live stream on YouTube that has no video or nothing really going on except for a thumbnail pushing people to Rumble and X, saying that I'm live there. And I can have and utilize YouTube to still push people to these other platforms. So, and I can definitely get you hooked up with some other individuals for more conversations, because I think a lot more people need to hear this kind of stuff, and I really appreciate you focusing on it, because having a channel, I'm kind of all over the place in a lot of the things that I'm covering, and it's hard for me to focus in on one area. So where we can have people like you doing this, I want to do everything I can to help support and aid you in your efforts as much as possible. So thank you again. I really appreciate you. If you can bear with me one second, I'm just going to do the wrap up and stop recording.
Sure.
So again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have links down below for everything that we talked about on today's show. I greatly appreciate you tuning in. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, I ask you, what are you waiting for? Make sure you're subscribed. If you are subscribed, make sure you are actually still subscribed, because there's been lots of people who have been unsubscribed and are not even aware of it. So just check your subscription status. Make sure you're still subscribed. With that being said, I encourage you, as always, to be a blessing to others. Treat people how you want to be treated. Be the glitch you want to see in this matrix. Be the change you want to see in this world. Question everything. Know yourself. And until next time, practice change.